All right, hello and welcome to URISA's Climate and Community Resilience Committee webinar series. This is the 9th webinar in the series this year, and I really encourage you to check out the recordings of the other 8 available. They're on URISA's webinar page. My name is Fredericks, and I'm a past URISA board director, and I work for the U.S. Geological Survey's National Geospatial Program. Now, I'm currently acting as the Emergency Response Coordinator, so me moderating this webinar came at a perfect time, especially as we're talking about climate and community resilience. But I also serve as a National Map Liaison for the User Engagement Office, and I'm joined by my colleague today, Jo Baker. She's been with the USGS since 2018, and she's currently working with the User Engagement Office as the National Map Liaison to Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. Now, prior to her current role, she primarily supported the cartographic data services and dynamic mapping. So Jo received her Bachelor of Science degree from the University of California, Los Angeles, and studied GIS and geospatial intelligence at George Mason University in Northern Virginia. So today, Jo is going to talk to us about on-demand custom topographic maps with topoBuilder. And as we learn about the topoBuilder application, I want to encourage you to enter your questions, your comments, your suggestions. We're always looking for feedback about our applications. If you'll put those in the Q&A, if you go down to the bottom of your Zoom application, there should be a Q&A option. Sometimes it disappears, so just hover your mouse over that bottom bar and it should appear for you. We'll let Jo address any questions at the end. So with that, I want to say thanks so much for joining us today, Jo, and the floor is yours.
Okay, great. Can you hear me?
You sound perfect.
Okay, so let me just get my screen shared here. All right, are you seeing my presentation just fine? Okay, perfect. All right, so hello everybody. My name is Jo Baker, as Zan said. I'm the National Map Liaison to Virginia, South Carolina, and North Carolina, and I'm with the User Engagement Office of the National Geospatial Program, or NGP. So the mission of NGP is to provide national topographic information to advance science, support government, enlighten citizens, and enable decision-making. The NGP provides foundation of geospatial data representing the topography, natural landscape, and man-made environment of the United States. And so one of the ways we do this is by providing topographic maps for the nation. So topoBuilder, make sure that's going, is an application to make your own map on demand with a user-selected center point anywhere within the United States and territories, with multiple scales and customizations, and that uses the best available data from the national map. So I'm just going to put this QR code and URL on screen for a few seconds here. You can actually follow along at topobuilder.nationalmap.gov. I'm going to go through some demo slides, and then after I get through those, I'm going to talk about the 2 products or on-demand topos that you can get from topoBuilder right now. So I'll just leave that up for a few more seconds here. Okay. So once you're in the application, the first thing you're going to do is choose which map type you're interested in, either the 7.5 minute topo or the 100K topo on the left-hand side there. And then once you choose your desired map type, it's going to highlight blue, and then you're just going to hit that next button there. So that's going to bring you to the Maps tab, and this is where you're going to zoom to your area of interest. On the right-hand side, you just have standard web map navigation. You can scroll and pan and zoom using your scroll wheel. As I mentioned, there's also a search button in the upper right-hand corner. As you'll see on this little corner here, we have a zoom into display grid button. And if you click that, it's just going to take you to zoom you all the way in so that you can see the sort of historical USGS quadrangles. You can see their names, and a lot of people find that useful if they're already familiar with the historical extents by the USGS. So once you're at your area of interest, you've got a couple of selection tools here. The first is this custom select, and that one is selected by default. And that one is just going to drop the map footprint wherever you click. Where you click is going to end up being the center of that map. The other tool is going to be the select by grid tool, And that basically means you are wherever in one of those boxes you click, that's the map footprint you're going to get. So you get that orange footprint. Anywhere you select in that box labeled Santa Fe, you're going to get the Santa Fe map. So once you've selected your map type and area, it will pop into the map watch list on the left here. You can see that the map title for this custom selected map is 7.5 minute topo 1. And then now you're going to start customizing that map. So one of the first things you can do is go to this edit layers function, and you're going to get a little interface here. This is a list of all the national map layers that come with a map or can come with a map, depending on where in the United States you've chosen. And all of them are turned on by default. So usually what you're going to do is go in here and just select off a couple of layers that maybe you're not interested in, or you can just leave them all be as well. If you do make any edits in here, then you're just going to want to hit that save button at the bottom right. And then the only thing to remember with edit layers is that it does actually affect all of the maps in your map list here and in the cart. So if you wanted to have maps with different layers selected, you can just go ahead and finish up this order and you can make those changes in your next order. So before we get into the file format there, you can see just above the yellow circle that if you do make changes in that edit layers, there's a little green user-defined content note that has popped up. And that's just going to be a little visual indicator that you have chosen anything besides the default, which is all layers on. So for file format, we have PDF or TIFF. The PDF is going to be GeospatialPDF. So you can open this up in any PDF viewer. It has basic GIS capabilities such as XY coordinates or measuring distances. And you can also turn on and off layers. TIFF is generally going to be GeoTIFF. And that's also obviously going to be geo-referenced. And you can bring that into GIS software or image editors as well. So another customization we have for the 7.5 minute topo is contour smoothness. And you can click this little blue icon there just to bring up this contour smoothness guide if you're not sure what that entails. So you're going to choose between low, medium, and high smoothing levels. Low smoothing is going to be high detail. Medium smoothing is what is selected by default and is probably most similar to what you see on US Topo or other USGS topographic maps. And then high smoothing is going to be low detail if you want contours on your map, but maybe that's not your focus. And to change that, you're just going to toggle this little toggle at the bottom here. So once you've confirmed all of your customizations, you're just going to want to check this box next to the map title and hit add to cart. You can also add multiple maps this way, or there's also a select all and then add to cart button you can use. And then once you do get to that cart, you're going to see all of your map selections divided by map type. So a section for all of your 7.5 minute topos and a section for all of your 100K topos. And then beneath those, it's going to be all of the individual maps, map titles, and their customizations. There's also a little counter there for your cart, as well as next to each map type, just so you can keep track of how many maps you've got going in your cart. If you did want to select more maps at this point, you could also just select this hit the select more maps button here, and that'll take you back to that map types. And you can put mini maps in your cart at once. There's no real limit there. So if you also want to change up the customizations in here, you can also hit this little pencil icon next to the map title. So next to 7.5 minute topo, there's one, and next to the 100K topo, there's another little pencil icon. And it's going to take you to this little edits interface. And here you can make all the same customizations as you can in the map watch list. So that edit layers, format, contour smoothing for 7.5 minute topos. And then you do want to make sure you hit save if you make any changes here. The only thing you wouldn't be able to do from this edit selection or edit interface is change the location of the actual map. To do that, you just want to delete this map from your cart. There's a little trash can icon there. Hit save, and then you can go back to the map types tab and reselect that map. So in any case, whether you hit save or cancel, it's going to take you back to the cart there. And then you'll hit checkout once your finalized all your map selections. And then all we're going to need from you is a email address. So once you input that and hit checkout, you're going to get this export succeeded pop-up. And then once you get this, you know your map is on its way to be processed and delivered. It does sort of like talk back to what your email address was. It also gives you a confirmation number. It does say, please return this order number for your records, but you should get it immediately in the confirmation email. So once your maps, as soon as your maps are processing, within just a couple minutes, you should get this confirmation email on the left. And that has a list of all the maps as well that you've ordered in that one order, and all of the customizations are listed there as well. And then as each map is completed, you will get a delivery email. So one confirmation email and then one delivery email per map. And in that delivery email, you'll get that download link. These download links do expire after about 60 days. And so this email has that expiration date. And also feel free to share the email or the link with your friends and colleagues. They can also download the map in that time period for free as well. Okay, so I mentioned that confirmation number earlier. So what you would do with it is at any point after you've submitted your order, as you're going to go into the track tab of the application and just put that in that box there and hit track. And you'll get a little box that sort of gives an overall summary of your order. You can see right there, it says delivered. And then on the wider section of the application on the right, once you click that little box, you'll have all of the details for the order as well. So in this particular order, they have a 1 7.5 minute topo and one 100K topo, which is Santa Fe there. And this is another location where if for some reason you can't find the delivery email that has the download link, you can come into here, and also there's a download link for each map as well. Just across the top here are just some pre-created filters. Especially useful if you have a large number and variety of maps in this order. So you can see once I've hit the 100K topo filter at the top there, just the Santa Fe 100K topo is now available. The last thing I want to mention is that there is a refresh button down here. So if you're sort of like watching your maps be processed and delivered, and you're kind of waiting on everything to be done, you can just hit this refresh button instead of re-inputting that confirmation number, and all of the maps in that order will update. Okay, so now I'm just going to talk about the two products that come from topoBuilder, starting with the 7.5 minute topo. So these maps are similar to some of the most well-known USGS topographic maps and are 1 to 24,000 or similar scale in the entirety of the United States. Each map also includes shaded relief and imagery. And as I mentioned earlier, it also has that additional contour smoothing customization. So the 7.5 minute topos are based off of our US topo maps. And those maps are refreshed roughly every 3 years, but there's no customization options, and they're only available in those historical extents. And then, so shown here is a popular place on the Colorado River called Horseshoe Bend. And of course, there are US topo maps available for the area. But what often happens when you have a specific area of interest in mind is that it overlaps with multiple maps and be a little bit more difficult to interpret there. And so really the hallmark, in addition to the data recency of on-demand topos, is that you can center your map exactly where you need it to. So just to briefly compare US topos and 7.5 minute topos, since they do kind of look a little bit similar at a distance, they do have different logos right at the top center. The map credit note at the bottom left is going to be a little bit different. You might get different label placement even for the same feature, since on-demand topos have fully automated labeling implemented. Depending on the age of the US topo, you could also get symbology differences. So you can see in this particular 7.5 minute topo, it has the updated colors for trails in orange, woodland tint green, and blue hydrography. Down at the bottom center, you're also going to get on the user-defined content note of if you made any changes to the layers. And you're also going to get that contour smoothness note on 7.5-minute topos. Slight differences in the quadrangle location diagram. And then for maps created using that custom select tool, you're going to get a generic map title instead of the historic title. So here you have 7.5-minute topo 1 instead of Highlands Ranch. So just to recap, US topo maps are staged, whereas on-demand topo maps are, as you would expect, created on demand. You can get that center custom center point with on-demand topos. On-demand topos are also available in the additional 1 to 100,000 scale, which is that 100K topo that I'll talk about in just a second. The contours for US topo are pre-designed, whereas the contours for on-demand topos are generated on the fly. The 7.5-minute topo uses the 1/3 arcsecond DEMs, and the 100K topo uses our 1 arcsecond DEMs. And those DEMs are the updated and maintained by our 3D elevation program. US topos are updated roughly every 3 years, whereas on-demand topos will pull the best available national map data at the time of order. Both US topos and on-demand topos are free and unlimited. You're just going to have to wait a little bit while that map processes after you submit your order for on-demand topos. And in addition to the availability of US topos and on-demand topos in CONUS, Hawaii, Alaska, Puerto Rico, US Virgin Islands, on-demand topos are also available in the Pacific territories. Okay, so moving on to the 100K topo, there's this little graphic I have here just to sort of demonstrate the footprint difference. So in the red there would be the footprint of a 100K topo, and the black is going to be the 7.5-minute extent for comparison. So we've gone basically from a map that can cover a portion of a city to one that covers, it could cover most of a metro area. And then just have another example here in the Grand Canyon area. The black outlines are the historic 1 to 100,000 scale extents. And then inside that, you can see the 32 7.5-minute extents that sort of in the dashed orange lines that nest within that. 100K topos were announced this year, just in January, and they're the first all-purpose 1 to 100,000 scale topographic maps produced by the U.S. Geological Survey in over 30 years. And additionally, with the release of these maps, USGS topographic map coverage at this scale has expanded from the historically available CONUS and Hawaii to include Alaska and the territories. And with those Pacific territories being Guam, Commonwealth of Northern Mariana Islands, and American Samoa. US topos also have their own symbology. And then if you wanted a full symbol guide, that they actually do come with each download. In the PDF, you can find them in the attachments. Also new is the expansion of the land cover classes. So there are 5 land cover classes exclusive to 100K topo. So in addition to the woodland tint that you would see traditionally on USGS topographic maps, we've got shrub scrub, grassland, crop pasture, and barren. And these have all been, these are derived from the latest NLCD data for their respective areas. I did also want to mention that there is not going to be imagery or the contour smoothing customization on 100K topos, but we do hope to add back in shaded relief. So what's next? topoBuilder is in active development, and we're hoping to add several more products to join the 7.5-minute topo and 100K topo. The development on a 1 to 250,000 scale map is actually well underway. And just as an example, this is an historical 1 to 250,000 scale map. And then there's that Grand Canyon graphic from earlier comparing 100K and the 7.5-minute extents, just sort of laid roughly on top of it, just to get an idea of how much area these maps would likely cover. So farther down the pipeline, we're looking at user-added content, partnering with the USGS store in order to have a print-to-order capability for on-demand topos. And we're also looking at providing the GIS data associated with your map, kind of similar to the Topo Map vector products, if you're familiar with those that are associated with US topos. And we're also looking at other scales after the 1 to 250,000 scale maps complete, such as 1 to 50K. So what you see on the right there is basically some basic mock-ups and inspiration we have for those future additions, although they are a little bit down the way in terms of implementation. So I just wanted to finish off by talking about some of the resources we have for topoBuilder. Usually a good place to start if you're not already in the application is usgs.gov/topoBuilder. Pretty straightforward URL to remember. And a lot of the information I've talked about today is written there. There's also, you can also go directly to the application or also explore our other topographic maps or learn about the national map from this page. We also have release notes and known issues pages. So we are currently on version 1.5.6 of topoBuilder, but you can go to the release notes page and find out all of the changes and enhancements and bug fixes that have kind of happened since the application and maps were first released in February of 2022. And then the known issues page is also very valuable if you're going through the application, looking at your maps, and you think you found a bug, but you're not sure if we're aware of it or not. That's a good one to check as well. So you can find the links to either of these things on that usgs.gov/topoBuilder page I just shared, or you can find it in the help tab of the application itself. And then you can also see there's a number of other links that you can click on to learn more. And we also have a couple of user guides in there as well. Okay, so that's all that I have. Thank you very much for your time. You have my contact on there. We also have a National Map Help Desk that would be happy to take any feedback or provide any support if you're working on this later on. But yeah, I can take any questions if there are any.
Well, fantastic. Thank you, Joe, so much. If you joined after introductions, we've just been listening to Joe Baker of the USGS National Geospatial Program User Engagement Office, and she's been telling us about the topoBuilder application and resulting on-demand topo maps. And we're going to open it up for some Q&A, comments, suggestions, questions. Remember to use the Q&A function on Zoom. And we've got one so far. Is the metadata provided for the layers? Specifically, I saw the emergency management and pipeline layers.
I think there is some amount of metadata available that is specific to the layers and relevant to the time period at which it's pulled, but it might vary a little bit per layer. Every download does come with its own XML. So I would definitely look into that. And I think there's also contact information as well in there.
Great, fantastic. And I see, thanks for the presentation. Does it cost any money to use?
No, so it is completely free and also unlimited. So we have actually had people go through and click every single map that would cover an entire state, and we have fulfilled those orders. So not to give anybody any ideas, but yes, there's no cost to use this at all.
All right, go ahead and put your questions in the chat. And while we're waiting for additional questions, you may be wondering why the Climate and Community Resilience Committee wanted to showcase a presentation such as this, highlighting such an application. And I can just tell you from responding to Hurricane Debbie this week, how many people have been interested. We have the capability within the National Geospatial Program to take these topo maps, these on-demand topos that are created through topoBuilder, as well as those staged US topos, and have them printed on hard copies from the Defense Logistics Agency and have them shipped to emergency responders. Now, this capability, again, is only available for emergency response, as we are doing this for free in order to help support emergency responders in your community. So if you've gone and you've created an on-demand topo and you think that this would give you some good situational awareness in whatever emergency or natural hazard you're responding to, we know how important situational awareness is during an event, and it's also what can help you be more prepared and lead to that the community resilience on the back end. Joe and I were talking before the presentation started about forecasts and then the importance of going back and doing the hindcasts. So as you can imagine, and then too, in those areas where there is no power, sometimes it's awfully nice to be able to take a map and lay it on the hood of a car and kind of point to, directions that need assessed or anything else additional. So Joe, thanks for letting me take a moment and explain why I think personally that they're so important. Have you, Joe, encountered any requests from your states specifically for assistance with the topoBuilder application? Looks like she's frozen. Go ahead and remember to put your question in the chat. Go ahead. You're back. I will say for Florida, it was interesting on the National Map Liaison for Florida. Depending on when data are collected and entered into the national map, as Joe was saying, the best available data is usually the most recent data. So for those historical mappers out there, I apologize when I say best available, right? It depends on who you are. Some people are really interested in having historical topo maps. But when we say best available, we're usually talking most recent due to the fact that, oftentimes, especially with emergency response situations, we're working to have the most recent data. Well, for Florida specifically, the last staged US topos come from 2021. Well, what happened in 2022 and 2023 is the big Florida Peninsular LiDAR project data set was released. So those staged US topos aren't accessing that newer LiDAR data. That's one of the benefits of the US topo map. Remember, or the on-demand topos, is if you go in, again, you could do the on-grid and recreate some of the topo maps for Florida, but you're now pulling that newer LiDAR data set, which I think is really important, especially as you're looking at ortho imagery, right? If you're looking at the NAPE and it's not quite aligning with something, there's so much infrastructure changes, especially in Florida, that it could be a little, confusing if you're looking at the new ortho imagery, but potentially old LiDAR and those contours maybe aren't matching up. And then again, Joe, one of my favorite things about it is that contour smoothing. I think that's a really nice adjustment on those 7.5-minute topos, because we get in some areas, especially lower lying areas like Florida. And if you have those contour intervals set, depending on how you have them set, it can obscure your entire map. So any thoughts on contour intervals versus, right, how they're being actively dynamically created versus how actual cartographers have capability with like label placement in that when with the US topos? Any thoughts on that?
Right. So going back to the contour interval part of it, I think that has been one of our more requested, in not just the smoothing, but to actually change the contour interval. I think we're still sort of in the discussion period for that, but it is absolutely something that's been requested before for exactly the reasons you mentioned, whereas, it can make all the difference in being able to interpret the actual terrain. So yeah, I apologize if I dropped off for a second, a minute there earlier. So yeah, feel free to let me know if there's something I missed. But for the label placement, that is a enhancement that we have for on-demand topos, is that for the labels, no one touches it. Like we have there's the Maplex involved, but no one's sitting there, moving the annotation around. And that's the difference with US topos. So you might see an on-demand topos, maybe, like if you were to grade a particular label placement, maybe it's like a 94 out of 100 instead of like 100 out of 100 that you could see on a US topo. But then that allows us to get those maps out so much quicker when they're not undergoing individual review for labels.
No, that's a really good point. It's right. There's not going to be one application to rule them all, right? One map can't meet every need. And I always really appreciate having options, because it kind of goes back to when people come to you and they're like, we need data. And you're like, but what are you trying to map? That's the first question. So I think it's nice to have these these availabilities for people. I also wanted to point out to the group, especially since this is climate and community resilience focus, what I've got on the screen right now are 3 different QR codes. The first one being right to the topoBuilder application that Joe just did a great job demonstrating today. The one in the middle is one of my favorite bookmarked pages. It is the National Map applications. And what I mean by that is it's just a page that has the applications kind of curated into a list. But additionally, it's got a little blurb about what each of those applications does. As we were just saying, there's no one application to rule them all. So I think it's really important to be able to know what applications are available to you, but also to know what the purpose is. So it's a good page to visit and maybe bookmark. It's got access to the National Map Viewer, the downloader, the 3D DEM viewer as well, which is really cool. We take all that 3D LiDAR data and then on the fly create some custom aspect slope hill shade products that are nice and help you visualize the data. Also has access to the LiDAR Explorer. That's one of our tools where you can draw a little area and you can see which tiles can be downloaded from that area of interest, which projects they're coming from. And if you see a little green icon on there, it even lets you jump to a viewer. We've got entwined point tile services, so you don't have to pull any of those LiDAR point clouds down to your local machine. First, you can actually go into that viewer without any GIS on your system, free to use, and see if that LiDAR will meet your needs. You can adjust the elevation ramp, the color styles, the classifications. So that's a really good resource too that's listed in that middle QR code, the National Map applications. And then finally on the right, for you that want to pull some of these data right into your own map. Sometimes you've created this wonderful application and just wish you had another layer. We've got the National Map layers as services. So go ahead if you want to scan that QR code. It's a helpful one. If you look at toward the very bottom, you'll even see that there are some web feature services if you want to make some adjustments. But there are things in there from NLCD imperviousness to fish and wildlife. We've got the wetlands layers in there and National Park Service boundaries. We've got the NAPE imagery index. We even have the 3D bulk point query service. So if you pull in that service, if you want to click a point on your map, it will tell you what the elevation is based on the newest 3D LiDAR data. So we've got lots of great services that you could pull into your applications. And again, these layers are what are feeding the topoBuilder application. I personally love the topoBuilder application. It's great that I can turn off all of those extraneous layers for my applications and come up with this kind of low size map that I can just shoot to people. And it's great because all I do is send them the link and they go and access it. And we're all looking at the same map, no matter how far apart we are. Have you ever had any access or access questions, Joe, with the mobile viewer? I found the mobile application to be really handy too.
We did go through a round of sort of improving the mobile version of topoBuilder. So I'm glad to hear that seemed like it was easy to use. I don't think we have had any specific questions recently, but that was one of the enhancements that we focused on early on. And we do make sure that it is that's part of the testing that's done every time a release is getting prepped for the public. Extensive testing is done on the mobile platform as well.
I think that's great because oftentimes, right, I might not have my PC handy, but I sure do have my phone. And it's nice that it was still user friendly. And that's hard to do, to have an app that works in both ways.
I think the viewer and the downloader as well are actually surprisingly usable on mobile, despite, the things you can do in them are even more complex than topoBuilder.
Sure, absolutely. And coming from dynamic mapping and cartographic data services, have you noticed a shift as you think as a liaison? Again, we liaisons, we're trying to connect federal, state, local agencies to the data and resources of the national map while also collecting your feedback to send back to them, because we're not making these applications for fun. We're making them to be useful. So, right, if the best app is the one that's used, we need your feedback. Have you noticed collecting any different feedback as a liaison on the landscape versus when you were sitting in cartographic data services?
I do feel like people do need that sort of in the moment data access. And so compared to US topo maps, depending on when they were produced, topoBuilder does start to sort of get at that more recent data and more relevant data when you can edit the layers. But something that the on-demand topos and topoBuilder kind of get at in a more general sense is making it so that our data in the national map, we do want to be able to make maps with it, of course, but we also want it to be usable for, many applications at many different scales. And so the topoBuilder and on-demand topo are one version of that, but we want to be able to, for this data to be usable to everyone in as many applications as possible. And so that interoperability and multi-scale ability is really important to us.
I love that. I think that is very important, especially to reduce duplicative effort.
Exactly.
Right, across the federal landscape. If we can make taxpayers' dollars stretch a little farther, me as a taxpayer too, I appreciate that. So that's neat to hear. So I have a question for the group. I wonder if any of you had got your phone out at the beginning. If anyone did and they scanned the QR code and they followed along, has anyone received their email saying that their map is ready yet? It's always a curious thing. It depends on how many layers you included on it. One time, I think during our call, Joe, you were presenting and someone chatted me and they were like, I got my map. And it was pretty good timing. I was impressed. So just raise your hand if anyone submitted a map request. I'm kind of curious if you had anyone following along that way. Okay, Jamie, I appreciate that. I like that. Okay. And we have a question from Jeanette. She says, are the places on the USGS maps, like schools, churches, et cetera, the same as what's in the census data?
I don't think we use census for our structures. Some of it is from our National Map Corps. So that's crowd surface, crowd. Am I saying that right? Yeah.
Crowdsourced, you got it.
I'm like, don't have the word for some reason. Crowdsourced structures program. And some of it is from, I think, Highfeld and other sources at the federal level. So there might be some differences. I'm not sure how census gets their structures, but we do have a number of sources, and some of those may be in common with the census, depending on the particular structure type.
No, that makes sense. And I bet in that XML file too, Jeanette, if you're interested, it might give you more specific information. I will say too, speaking to XMLs, I thought it was interesting when I downloaded a GeoTIFF and it had the ortho imagery layer. I got two XMLs. One was for the map data, and then one was for the ortho imagery itself. So I thought that was really helpful that they're being good about metadata. I love good metadata. It's so very useful. So good questions. And Jamie, who raised the hand about submitting a map request, says it's still being processed. I'll accept that. Okay. I've had some come in as quickly as like 12 to 15 minutes. And then I did one for most of Puerto Rico, 100K. And it took a little bit longer to come in, rightfully so.
It does depend on, the amount of map content and, if someone happened to have given, a topoBuilder presentation an hour ago and you had 50 people submit, there might be like a queue going on. But you can, and definitely if you haven't gotten it within, they say 5 days, but the vast majority are delivered within 24 hours. So usually if you don't get it within the first couple days, feel free to reach out to that help desk and see what's going on.
Great advice. Yes, TNM_help.
Yes.
.gov. So one last call for any questions while we still have Joe, I should say. I'll give it a second. In this time, I will remind you again, if you have any emergency responders in your life where you support them, please remind them or let them know that we do have that capability of printing hard copy topo maps or on-demand topos and getting them drop shipped to your location. It's one of those offerings that I'm excited that DLA is willing to partnership with us on that. I think it's a great resource in certain situations. So I'm not seeing any questions come in. Now's the time. We've got Joe. She's done it all. She's been cartographic data services, dynamic mapping.
I wouldn't say that.
Done it all. She's being modest. That's good. Okay, well then I am going to go ahead and start to wrap us up. So I will say thank you so much, Joe, naturally, and a big thank you to our attendees today. We do hope you'll be joining us again soon for one of the many upcoming URISA programs. Our next webinar is August 20th, when you'll get an overview for applying ArcGIS story maps to facilitate collaboration and knowledge sharing. I'm going to leave this up for a second. There is a QR code for that one if you're interested in registering. We also have 3 opportunities to strengthen your leadership muscles during our GIS Leadership Academies. One is in November in Fort Worth, Texas. We've also got one online in December. And next week, we will be hosting our first offering of the Advanced GIS Leadership Academy in Chicago. So stay tuned for the results of that. I'm very excited for that and was unable to attend myself, but I'm hoping to at some point in the future. The first GLA was amazing, so I can only imagine what I'm going to learn from the advanced. Additionally, URISA's annual conference, GIS Pro, will be in Portland, Maine this October with a great lineup of workshops, sessions, socials. Be sure to check it out. Again, a QR code if you're interested. And the schedule is online already, so you can take a look at what the agenda includes. There is currently a salary survey open. We encourage you all to respond by August 19th. And if you scan the QR code and participate, the idea here is that your input will shape the industry standards, and it really does provide invaluable insights. I don't know if you've checked out other salary surveys before, but it's really helpful, especially if you're doing position descriptions or planning, PDs, things like that. So we have Wendy letting us know in the chat that the presenters for the Story Map webinar on August 20th is the San Diego Regional Climate Collaborative. So that's sure to be a good webinar. Again, that's August 20th. And then, of course, one of the greatest benefits of URISA is the network, the relationships, the connections we've made. So be sure to get connected and stay connected. You can go to urisa.org. You can find the latest news, the resources, these educational products, the webinar links, and so much more. So we thank you all so much for your attendance. Special thanks to Joe Baker, and we wish you all a wonderful day. Until next time, thank you so much.